guys, welcome to the channel and welcome to this little video today. It's not a top 10 or a listing or anything, but it's just me and the lad were talking about today about underrated films. Now, it's quite difficult to sort of describe a film as underrated because a lot of people tend to tag films as underrated, although they're not, but that just because people are not talking about the film every 5 minutes, oh, it's got to be underrated. No, it's not underrated at all. So people, I think, use the term underrated quite sparingly and on films that are very popular and have a fan base and are quite like huge, in that sort of fan base. And a lot of people absolutely love everything about that movie. And there's loads of films. Now, I watch a few YouTube channels and they say, oh, it's such an underrated film. It's not. And the films they choose are the least underrated. Like, I saw a top 10, some guy in America doing a top 10 underrated horror films. And every single one were, wow. When if you saw it, you think, that's not underrated. That's not underrated. He had films in there like, Dawn of the Dead. He had films. They're all like major hit films, Dawn of the Dead, the new It films and stuff like that. I think these were all highly successful movies, and it's like that they're not underrated, and they've got a huge fan base. So I don't understand where it's coming from. So I had a little flick through some of my movies because I don't actually think hardly any of my movies are underrated, if I'm being honest with you. Um, Maybe Gregory's Girl on 4K. I think Gregory's Girl is kind of like an underrated, unsung hero of the comedy sort of genre. It's a Scottish comedy film about adolescence and a guy growing up. Gregory trying to find a girlfriend, and he likes this new girl, but she's not interested in him, but he finds out another girl likes him. It's a great comedy, great film. To me, that's underrated because it didn't come out as highly successful. It wasn't a major blockbuster film, and I think it did better in America than it did the UK, if I remember right. But that to me is a kind of a little bit of an underrated film, in the sense like it didn't get the publicity or the sort of reviews. It got okay-ish sort of reviews, or it wasn't reviewed at all. So I picked out a few movies that I think could be classed as underrated because maybe they didn't get any review at all or just went under the radar a lot. Like the first one, Eaten Alive, which is a cannibal film. Um, and it's only had in the UK this release here on Vipco on DVD. Or there hasn't been a UK Blu-ray release on it. You might be able to get it in America on for a Blu-ray, but here in the UK, we just have the DVD, and I still got my one from when it was sent to me from the Vipco Club, which was a club I used to be in. You paid, I think it was 11 £10 a month, and every month they sent you two movies, and I've got most of them still. So Eaten Alive, I look at being quite an underrated film because it's gone under the radar, and it's actually quite a good story for a cannibal film. Yes, it's still got the horrible animal cruelty in it, but that aside, it's a good sort of like little cannibal film, to be honest. I think it was overshadowed by like Cannibal Holocaust and Cannibal Ferox and Cannibal Apocalypse or Slave of the Cannibal God. I think they were the sort of the popular ones, and this one sort of went under the radar a little bit. But to me, I think that's quite an underrated sort of film, in a sense. Um, it's not reviewed very frequently. Most of the films that I tried to search and have a look to see if anybody's done reviews of these sort of films, and when I think, oh, there's not any views, not just on YouTube, but I'll search the internet, and it tends to go a little bit by a bar. No one actually really talks about it. So to me, that's kind of underrated in the sense of it went under the radar. And so I think That's underrated. But there is a different kind of underrated. Now, underrated is your own personal choice, where you think, where you personally feel, because you don't know, and it's your own opinion, but you feel that there's certain films are not appreciated for what they are and what they represent. So you will look at these, oh, these are underrated because nobody really likes them or talks about them, and you think it's a top movie. So that's another version of underrated. So in some circumstances, you can think, I thought that film was incredible, but other people say, oh, it's mediocre or whatever. So that is a sense of sort of underrating, and that's why I've picked Madman out, because I think it's such a cool film, really, really good film, and it's quite a cool slasher movie. And I think again it was buried by others like The Slayer. The Slayer's another great film, but there were films like The Burning and Just Before Dawn and all these sort of other sort of slasher films that came out in this sort of period. And this one sort of went under the radar. But Arrow loved this film. I'm sure, I know they do, because they've put out a 4K. God, I want that film. I really want the 4K of Madman. My Madman is battered. Look at it, absolutely battered. I've had this. This was one of the first Arrow films I think I brought, to be honest, when I started to buy Blu-ray films. I have got this somewhere in my Vipco collection, but this I love it. It's such a cool film, but as you can see, it's all battered and ripped, and I do need to upgrade it. Even the case is all dirty where the stickers are on it. That was an old 2 for 30 HMV sticker that was on it when I bought it years ago. And I love this film. It's one of my films that I visit, I'd say yearly. I put a visit into Madman. And I don't think I've even reviewed it on my channel. That's given me an excuse, right, to pick up the 4K. I'll keep an eye on it. I'll try and get the 4K at a decent price, but yeah, it's one of my favourite slashers, and a real underrated one, in the sense that I think this is incredible, but everyone seemed to like the Burning and all this, which I love too, but I think this one sort of like everyone gets, yeah, it's not as good as that, and it's a shame, because it's a brilliant film. So it's underrated in that personal sense of form. Hello, mate. My little puppy here. There he is. So that's an underrated film. Now this one, I think get a bad rap because it was it was in a Video Nasties, and so everyone was expecting it to be this horrible sort of like Video Nasty gore and violent film, and it is to a point, but it's also not in a sort of way, and so a lot of people would have been disappointed with it. But then they've lost the film and thinking, look beyond its history as a Video Nasty and look at it as a film on its own, because it's fantastic. But because people look at it as a Video Nasty, it gets sort of bide again, because it's supposed to be a Video Nasty, but it's not like Cannibal Holocaust or anything like that. But they missed the point that it is a great film. So it gets underrated, from my opinion, in that form, where it's great. And if you just took the time and looked at it as a film on its own, instead of worrying about the labels being labelled with, it's a fantastic film. And it's Madhouse, which is kind of like a slasher kind of film. But sorry, the dog's just getting up and down, and it's a great little film, really cool film. I believe it's an Italian. I'm probably wrong. I'm always wrong, but again, it's a nice 2-disc set with the booklet, and I managed to re-pick this up because I've not owned this for many a year. I haven't owned this since VHS. I had it on VHS back in the Video Choice days when I used to go in and buy X rentals. I used to own an X rental copy of this, and I've never picked it up since, even when it came out with Arrow. but I managed to pick it up because I think I went to CX one day and I had a voucher, and I thought Madhouse. I thought, oh, it's going to be the Vincent Price film because it was sideways on, and I thought, oh, what am I picking that up? And I picked it up. I thought, oh my god, no, it's the old slasher film that I liked, but and it's a really cool film. And I sort of researched it a little bit before. I still haven't got round to watching this edition yet. I will, but it came out when I read up about it. I sussed out it was in the video nasty section. I think it wasn't that bad, was it? But there we go. It was in there, and I was just thinking maybe that's why it's not sort of like got the love it deserves, because everyone wanted it to be this mad, crazy video nasty, and it wasn't. It was like a slasher film that's got put into it because of its title, I think, more than anything else. But yeah, it's a good film, and to me, I class that as an underrated film, just because it is sort of like got mislabeled. The next one is my lad's choice because he said, "Dad, why don't you do sort of like a five or top five of underrated films?" I said, "Yeah, it's quite a good idea," but I said to him, "What films do you want in there?" And he said, "Fistful of Dollars." I went, "Yeah, it's a great film, a great film, but I don't know if it's underrated because the Sergio Leone trilogy were all kind of like well received, well reviewed, and made millions and quite successful, and people love them now. So I don't think that's really an underrated film." So I said to him, underrated films would be more sort of like The Slayer or Madman. So he said, "Oh, what about this one, Dad? Four Breaks." And I thought, yeah, that's quite a good one. So Four Breaks is going in there, or The Mutilator, as you may know it as, but the original title was Four Break. Yeah, this is again another American slasher. Again, that sort of like got mixed upon a huge avalanche of movies that were all the pretty much same. We had so many slasher films, and a lot of them were going to camp, going to the beach, or wherever it is. The kids going away on a holiday, or your American Pie kind of story, but turning it into a slasher. And The Mutilator is one of them. I think got lost, and this was extremely gory, and some really good deaths in the film. But again, it's sort of like it's I think all of these were all lost upon the the amount of horror films that were coming out of the period, and they just seem to just sort of get lost upon their way. And I was just thinking, wow, it's such a shame, because these are just as good as Friday the 13th, just as good as Halloween, Scream, the big titles, My Bloody Valentine and Valentine. I know he did last summer in the 90s. These films were the influence for some of those films, and I think a lot of them just got lost. And so it's great that Arrow and 88 Films actually put these out. So a lot of these films, as you can see, are slasher films, because I can only think they've got lost amongst the actual, like I said, the actual barrage of films that came out. So sorry, guys. And some of them just took off and flew out, like The Burning and Friday the 13th and all those sort of films. They just took off and were so popular. Just Before Dawn, I remember that being huge when that came out. It was everywhere. There were posters everywhere. It was. I bought an ex-rental DVD of it, and I just remember it being absolutely everywhere. And so I don't class him as underrated because everyone sort of watched it and liked it. But I never saw The Mutilator back in the day. I saw Madhouse and I saw Madman, but it was just I didn't see them in the mass produced that they were, and I used to buy magazines back then and look at film reviews, and unless you picked up a horror one, these films wouldn't be in there, along with my last pick, which is Nightmare Beach, an Italian slasher film. Again, it's another one that no one really ever talks about, and it just sort of get lost completely under the radar. And again, I think it's because the Italian horrors were renowned to being one or two things: extremely gory and violent, or a giallo. And this sort of like was a slasher um, film, and it was kind of like a little. I think they were trying to be quite mainstream with this film. Is it an Umberto Lenzi film? I can't remember. Does it say in here? Trying to see if it says who it's directed by. I can't see it, but I'm sure it's Umberto Lenzi. You guys might be able to read it on there. But it just seemed to have disappeared under the radar. And again, Umberto Lenzi was renowned for his cannibal and gory films and done some good giallo. So this slasher came out, and it was sort of like, maybe it was to sort of appeal to the American market, because again, it was about these sort of teens on the beach, and there's a killer on a motorcycle with a killer bike, and it was so cool. Really good film. I really like it. It's really cheesy, and that could be another reason why a lot of these films do go under the radar, because they're a little bit cheesy. That Madman Mars looks a bit cheesy, you know, but he's still really cool, and I think a killer bike almost. It's sort of like a cheesy but a great concept. Really, really cool. So they were my sort of choices of underrated films. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are underrated. It's just my opinion. Okay? It's just my opinion. I believe that these films are underrated. Like I said, to be underrated to me, it's got to be a little bit unsuccessful when it comes out. Comes out to sort of like moderate to poor reviews. The public don't take to it, and it just sort of disappears and goes under the radar, or it's released amongst a batch of films and's got lost, and so because so many other films become so popular that it just gets lost, and you're just thinking, wow, what happened there? Like, if you look, when we had films that were popular, when we had the possessed films coming out, and the found footage films like Blair Witch, and the incredible Paranormal Activity films, which are great. But I think that the Grave Encounter films got underrated because of the success of those films. So that's what I mean by it. Like, when something comes out in a vast amount, things can get lost, and that sort of makes them a little bit of a underrated gem. There's loads of films like The Silent House, and films like that, which I think, okay, and Lovely Molly is another sort of film that I think, because it came out in these sort of films were coming out willy nilly, like, Insidious and Conjuring and all these kind of creepy films. Other little films that maybe didn't have the company was a budget to be promoted as much, get sort of lost by, and so they kind of like become a little bit underrated, in the sense of like, they're good films, but no one's paying them any sort of attention because of the bigger films, like the supernatural um, alien film The Fourth Kind came out the same sort of time as sort of like Contact came out. So it was like, and it got lost. And I just thinking, wow, that's such a good film, and no one seems to watch it. So that is my interpretation of underrated films. Not successful, um, audience not showing any interest in it, but it's actually a good film. And if you sat and watched it as for what it is, it's a cracking film. Or it's got mixed up in a batch of films that have come out and the films have got lost. So there we go. That's my interpretation of underrated. Cheers, guys.